All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So Ben Engel is a graduate of West Alabama. He also got his master's degree from Ole Miss. He has been with Therapy South at Work for 10 years now. He helped build the program. He's actually my boss. He has 4 kids, and he is involved with Desperation Church. He also likes skinny jeans and sneakers.
Yes, thank you for that introduction, Jessica.
You're welcome.
Yeah, they tease me about my jeans, but really it's just when you hit the weight room and you do a bunch of squats and you have big calf muscles, it makes slim jeans look skinny. So that's the joke.
We'll go with that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the introduction. It's good to be here today, and I'm presenting the screen, so I can't tell what I look like to everybody. So that's kind of weirding me out, but that's okay. So I appreciate you guys giving me the time and listening in, and just kind of wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about stretch and flex programs, or warm-up programs, warm-up stretching, whatever you're used to calling them. We've been doing it about 10 years now, like Jessica said. So we've definitely seen it all, and we've tried different things, and we've had some things fail, and we've had some things work really good. And so just want to talk to you a little bit about that today, and kind of how to implement a program, how to get buy-in, and kind of the why, and how to pitch it, and all that good stuff. So for your occupational athlete. All right, so our objectives today is we're going to be exploring stretch and flex programs. Like I said, we've definitely had our fair share of I guess trial and error when it comes to this. Sometimes you try something and it doesn't work for many different reasons. We'll talk about challenges that you might encounter and you have to switch it up. But at the end of the day, it usually is something that you can figure out a way to implement and get going. We're going to talk about building a program that targets the needs of occupational athletes. That's another thing. You know, if we kind of skip ahead a little bit and think about challenges, you don't want to challenges from your management, especially, is a lot of times going to be time constraints, and is it worth it, and kind of weigh in the cost of time. Let's see, I'm having some trouble, it looks like. Let's see, where's the having some presentation trouble, sorry. All I see is stop sharing, Jessica. That's the only option I have.
So on your screen, it should say like present from current slide. There should be like a button in the top corner on your presentation. There you go. Because it should not, as you're going through it. If you go over to the other side of the screen, there should be a box. Drop down.
Oh, from current slide.
Yep, there you go.
It'll keep up for now, though.
Yes, it should.
Okay. All right, let's turn these subtitles off. Okay, let's try that. So sorry. That's the challenge you get sometimes when you're doing these things remote, I guess. But going back to that, I was saying, building a program that targets the needs of the occupational athletes, you're gonna have opposition. So you definitely don't want to just throw something at the wall and see if it sticks. You want to make sure it targets what they're doing, what kind of job they're doing, kind of what they've seen, risk factors, musculoskeletal issues they've had in the past, and then defining proper usage of warm up and micro breaks. Is that working now, Jessica?
It's not changing as you go, but if you just scroll down, I'm not sure what your screen looks like.
Okay. Maybe I'll just stay in this view if that's okay.
That works.
Can you see the whole slide this way?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So if we go back to the history of stretching, not a whole lot of documentation like there is with any kind of topic when you get too far back, but they do seem to think that the Roman Empire, you can at least date it back to then when they were using it to keep the soldiers in shape during that massive reign, that dynasty they had. So I kind of picture Julius Caesar out there leading stretches with his soldiers and keeping them in shape. And then as we fast forward just a little bit, the first documented study that we can find is in the 18th century on stretching. And so that wasn't specifically in the workplace from what I can tell, but I kind of dug a little bit deeper there and kind of wanted to know what happened in the 18th century to trigger the increase in stretching or stretching in general. So if you think about what was going on in the 18th century, you had the Industrial Revolution. So what happened during that time is you had, up until that point, you had people doing all the work themselves. It was very manual. You can even track that back to health issues like obesity and weight issues and that kind of thing. People were moving so much until this point. So here comes the Industrial Revolution, and you've got machines that can do the job that the humans are used to doing. So what might have happened, this is just a proposed theory, and I read a little bit online of some other thought processes behind this. What might have happened is due to increase in static posture, because the human went from doing the work to the machine doing it. Maybe what happened is we started seeing some different musculoskeletal issues that we hadn't seen in the past, and issues and discomforts arise. And so people just started moving. They started doing stuff to break out of that static posture, because that's just kind of the instinct, right? We see it in the animal kingdom? What do you see a lion do right after it's had its long nap? It gets up and it's stretching. Or your dog at home, the first thing it likes to do when it gets up from a long nap is stretch a little bit. So it's just instinct for beings in general to move and to break out of posture. So in the 18th century, when the Industrial Revolution came along, that might have been what happened, is we went from doing all the work to the machines doing it. So we knew we had to start moving a little bit. All right, is that working now, Jessica?
Yes, it's fine.
Okay, all right, rock and rolling. So we'll talk about the different types of stretch and flex programs or warm-up programs. We'll talk about static stretching. We don't do a whole lot of that when we talk about laying out warm-up programs, because the work's not typically going to be completely still, right? You're going to at least be, even if it's really static job, they're going to at least be on an assembly line. We'll take that for an example. You're still going to be going to retrieve parts, back to the line, reaching up and down, doing those different things. So you're not completely still. So we do like to incorporate more of a dynamic program, I would say pre-shift type stretching at least. But when we talk about static stretching, we do typically, at least from our company, we like to incorporate those in the form of micro breaks or mini stretch breaks. So that's where the static stretching kind of comes into play for us. So then dynamic stretching is what you're used to, right? In the traditional setting, that's going to have the most carryover and that makes the most sense. And the human body is the same no matter what you're doing, right? Whether you're playing a sport or you're putting together the parts of an engine, you're going to encounter the same thing. So we want to design those stretching to be similar. And also, a lot of the people we work with, when you talk about building rapport and getting buy-in to these type of programs, a lot of the folks we're working with are former athletes. And so they like that. They like to get in there and get moving, and kind of that gives them this sense of pride about their job. And they like to move and do the dynamic kind of pre-game type stretching. Now we do see some resistance training come into play sometimes. We've got a particular client in Alabama that we work with that we've rolled out a massive throwers 10 program in the last couple of years, and it's really started to take off this year. So we do see that sometimes, and we're going to talk about some research behind that. That doesn't typically take the place of warm-up stretching, and it doesn't for us. It doesn't in a lot of places, but it is good to sometimes explore that option and see if we can do some things to target areas that way. So if we fast forward from the 18th century, we can see that workplace stretching, this is at least when you're going back and kind of going through the research articles, you can see it kind of started gaining some traction in the 1980s. So we'll reference some articles. There was a specific study in the late 80s that did 7-minute stretching twice a day. And they reported outcomes improvements in really everything, in range of motion, muscle size, blood flow increases, and they decrease stress and that. So that's pretty neat to see. I think it's cool. I don't know that we realize that it's been going on that long. And so it's nice to be able to go back and see some of that and see the evidence for it. So we're coming up on 40 years of stretching in the workplace. So it's time to jump on the train if folks aren't doing it. But, going through these and being able to pull this evidence should help you make your case. And that's kind of what we want to do today, is talk about how we can build that case if you're not doing that with your clients or your locations you're working with. So in the 90s, we see it continue to rise. I think there was a wave of exercise in general in the 90s. I might be speaking out of my age range, but I think that that's kind of when you started seeing the video stretching or the video exercises and the Richard Simmons and the folks like that. If there's some folks on the call that are a little bit older than me and I'm getting that wrong, I apologize. But I think that's when we started seeing that, and the hot pink and the neon outfits that people were following along to and doing the aerobic exercises. And so I think we see a rise in exercise in general. We also see that rise in the workplace. You start seeing some stretching more in the 90s and into the 2000s. And I think nowadays it's pretty standard to have some kind of warm-up program. We see that all the time when we're going around to potential client sites and talking to folks that we may start working with. We see something kind of standard protocol that maybe not be super specific, but they've at least got some kind of exercises or stretches posted on the wall somewhere, whether they're doing them or not. But it is kind of common to see it in the workplace nowadays. The main benefits and goals of a workplace stretch and flex program: we want to prevent injuries. That's the main goal always, right? We want to see some physiological gains. We want to see morale boost, and we want to build rapport. If we can do those things, that's a big win. If we can accomplish those things, the bottom three should lead to the top one. So if you're seeing physiological gains, morale boost, and building rapport with people, you should see a decrease in injuries. That's just how it works for many, many reasons. So that's our main goals there. Again, we'll go back to talking about how the human body is the same no matter what. So you're gonna respond to stresses the same way, and that's where as athletic trainers we can use our expertise. No matter how long you've been in the industrial field, you may be very new to it. You may have been doing it 10 years like me or longer. But we all work traditional at some point, and the human body is the same no matter what. So you saw the same injuries you're going to see, and you're continuing to see. So we want to target those the same way. All right, and when we see the muscles and everything being ready to work and more oxygenated, more blood flow increase, and we're just going to see a direct a decrease in injuries there. Just want to talk about some of the studies I came across. There's tons of studies, by the way, and I would encourage you to dive into them. I don't think I knew how many there were specifically to workplace stretching, but I wanted to just pull a few that I found the numbers to be quite convincing and encouraging. So we see and I like going back to these older ones a little bit too, just to see that it's been working for a long time. But Subaru, a big Subaru plant in '93. A stretching program that lasts twice a day for 5 minutes a piece, so 10 minutes total. They saw 30 to 40% cost avoidance. So 30 to 40% decrease in cost, and that's without job coaching or any other, ergonomic engineering changes, anything like that. This is just implementing a stretching program. This isn't an athletic trainer coming in and doing that. This is Subaru itself just implementing a stretching program, and they cut injuries almost in half. So I thought that was very convincing. And then, so if you think about if you can implement an effective stretching program, and you get even half of that, let's say you get 20% reduction, and then you combine that with good job coaching, some good ergonomic changes and engineering changes in human behavior, some treatment or some first aid, right? As OSHA likes to call it, then we would see hopefully at least half or more. So you can accomplish some really good things if you get an effective stretching program in place. All right. And then in '98, you see another one. This was a 2-month period. It was a lot of sessions, 36 sessions in there, and saw 0 musculoskeletal injuries. Now, I would like to see what they had before. This study didn't reference that. They didn't tell them the pre-injury numbers, but we've got some sites that we go to, and we've got about 15 different companies and a bunch of different sites. And there are definitely some sites there in our catalog that if we could go 2 months without having an injury, I'd be extremely happy, especially in some of those automotive manufacturing settings. So if anybody on the call are familiar with those, then you could probably agree with me that it would be pretty exciting to go without an injury for 2 months. 2015, 96 employees doing shoulder and neck stretching for 4 weeks, 5 days per week, twice a day. Improved significantly on their pain score and their pain rating when they did questionnaire type stuff. So we see this time and time again. There's plenty of these studies. There's another one in 2016 did a systemic review where they studied a bunch of different studies and they found strong evidence for resistance training programs, bans, that kind of thing. There's some different devices that some programs implement to use. And I like the 2018 one because we do work with a lot of office workers, and we had a big study with 142 of those where they saw a big decrease in neck, shoulder, and back pain when they followed the stretching program. So there's a lot of ammunition for you out there. A lot of ways to build your case and justify if you're not doing stretching. There's a lot of ways to justify that with your clients or your locations that you're going to. Talks about some physiological gains. That same 1998 study, we saw flexibility increases. They took measurements. They saw increase in flexibility with measurements. That was amongst the 60 employees there. So there's strong evidence that just a little bit physical activity. Again, we're not talking about any other intervention here. We're just talking about stretching can have a big impact. All right, and then in 2019, we had an 8-week study of stretching and strengthening program. By the end of the 8 weeks, they reduced the number of affected body parts, job stress, and incidences in the workplace. They also had some improved flexibility and hand grip strength. So I hate to just wheel off data to you, but I think the reason I'm doing it is I was so excited to find it. And I don't know that I realized we had this much data to support our cause with stretching on the workplace. Then we get into some morale booster stuff. I don't know how many of you out there have sites like this, but I think there's a handful of ours that if we could just increase employee morale, we would have such a decrease in injuries. It's tough when you think about going into the job every day and doing the same exact thing for 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day, the monotony of that. And then you have production demands and you have supervisors coming down on you. Morale gets pretty low, and I really am convinced that if we could just increase morale a little bit without any big changes in engineering or behavior, I think we could see a big decrease in injuries with a few of our clients. So going back again to that 98 one, even I thought this was interesting. Their overall self-worth, the impression of their self-worth was even increased. So they asked the employees at the end of that study, and their self-worth had even increased. So, and that's kind of our whole thing as athletic trainers. I always say I'm in it so that I can impact somebody's life for the better. However I do that, however I accomplish that, then that's the job. That's a job well done. So if we can make somebody feel better about themselves, then we're doing a good job there. In 21, there was a study that used yoga, interestingly enough, and I don't know how many sites that we could implement yoga, but maybe there's some that you could, especially maybe if you're working with some office settings. But they reduced their stress, their occupational stress, their work stress when they did that, and that was with almost 700 employees. So that's a strong evidence there to support your claim. So we like to get into pain science just a little bit. We won't get into it a whole bunch, but the bottom line is if we can feel better, it kind of goes back to that gate control theory. If we can kind of feel better with pain and our perception of pain, then we'll actually hurt less. So I would encourage you to dive into pain science a little bit. There's some really cool studies out there, and there's a lot of evidence to support some of those theories. But you can take a group of folks with the same injury, and if they just have a different outlook on life and they have a different attitude and their morale's different, you can take the one person that has the same injury and they don't talk about it much. They don't even realize they have it. It doesn't hold them back, and the other person can be almost completely debilitated by the same injury. So I'm a strong believer in the pain science theory. So I just wanted to kind of squeeze that in there. So improving these things can have a huge impact on pain perception. All right, moving on. So I think one of the biggest challenges we have as athletic trainers coming into the workplace, trying to maybe tell some folks how to change their job up just a little bit. That can be a challenge. That can be something that can create some hostility because you got somebody that's been doing a job for a long time the same way, and you come in hot trying to tell them how to do it. So I think one of the biggest goals early on, or maybe the biggest, is building rapport with those people. And what I've found over the 10 years is that when you get to lead stretches with your people, even if it's once or twice a week, it's really fun. It's a really good way to build rapport with them and kind of bond with them, especially when you start getting them involved. You kind of get in that stretching circle and you're joking about things and you're kind of picking on form a little bit maybe, and having a good time with it. You can build rapport, and that's the ultimate goal. It's just like when we work in the traditional setting, when we've got athletes, that we've all had athletes that are kind of, maybe they're a little shy to come to us or whatever, but we build that rapport with them. They're going to be much more likely to tell us about issues when they start having them, or discomfort when they start having them. So we'll go over some basic science. Everybody on this call, I'm sure, knows, but I think I wanted to hit bullet points, because when we are talking about selling this to our clients and our management and supervisors, it's good to kind of have elevator pitches ready. So this is kind of your elevator pitch to sell stretching and to support it. So bottom line is, stretching increases blood flow, right? Blood has hemoglobin in it that delivers oxygen to the muscles, and muscles need that oxygen to perform, promote good posture, prevent muscle strain, relax tight muscles. So that's your elevator pitch for stretching. Keep it in your back pocket. Keep it ready. It makes a lot of sense when you break it down like that to folks, whether it be your management supervisors or maybe the employees that are doing the stretching themselves. They may ask, why do we have to do this? We didn't do this before. We were doing just fine, or whatever. And so we want to be able to explain that to them in a way that they can digest, and that makes a lot of sense to them. Again, just this isn't really teaching you guys, because you know a bunch of the stuff, but this is more of giving you some points to teach your people on how to do it. All right. So we just want to stretch, obviously, to the point of tension, tightness. We don't want to go no pain, no gain. That's out the door at this point. I hope we all know that. There are some scenarios where we can say that, maybe in the rehab setting, when we're trying to gain motion after surgery, but not really the case with a lot of other stuff. So we don't want to go to the point of pain with anything, just performing those in nice, gentle, dynamic motion. All right. However long time allows. I threw 30 seconds on there. It really depends on how much time you have. So we'll talk about that too. Let's get into micro breaks versus warm-up programs just a little bit. We'll kind of talk about the difference. So if you don't know, micro breaks are mini little stretch breaks. We like to teach our employees how to do those themselves, really, because those are things that they should do throughout the day. Because when they do get into those static postures, they're not going to be given the time to break out and go, stretch for 5 minutes like they might be given pre-shift or coming off of an extended lunch break or something. But they can keep all these. You can give them these mini stretch breaks to keep in their head, or post them. You can ideally you have a place to post them up maybe, and whether they're performing a job on an assembly line where they're looking down for a long time, or whatever it is, you can teach them, some mini stretch breaks to break out of that position, just to replenish that blood flow. And I typically explain micro breaks to our people and our employees as I use a water hose example. And I got made fun of. I don't know if anybody on this call calls it a water hose or a hose pipe, but apparently I said it wrong one day. I didn't know there was a difference. I didn't know it was a controversial subject, but apparently there's a right way to say it. I'm going to say water hose this time, and hopefully that's the right way to say it. But if you take a water hose out in your yard and that water hose has any kind of kink in it, the water flow is not going to be ideal, right? It's going to be cut off. I'm getting a whole lot of pressure. So the same thing in the human body. If we have a little kink in the hose, whether it be at the neck, looking down in the assembly line, or bending over at the waist, or whatever the job demand is, we're going to have a little kink in our hose, and we're going to have some decrease in blood flow, and therefore a decrease in oxygen flow. And I like to tell them also, like, use that example. If I'm riding in the car, maybe I cross my leg on a long trip. Maybe that's not the safest thing to do, but you kind of cross your leg, and after a little while, that your foot kind of falls asleep. And that's because you put a kink in your hose. So again, just using those examples to kind of break it down. Easy to digest, easy things to remember. But if I can unkink that hose, I'm looking down for a long time. Maybe after I'm done with a part, I've passed it down the line. Maybe I look up and I do some neck stretches. If it's if it's something that I'm bending over at the waist a lot at, maybe it's getting up and doing a little back extension. So just easy way to explain that, doing our micro breaks. All right, so static and dynamic stretches are typically more in the warm-up program. Again, we talked about that before, mostly dynamic. So static's going to be more in that micro break. And then the micro breaks are typically performed by the employee themselves. Like I said, again, important for you to be able to sell it, pitch it in a way that they can understand why it's important to do so. All right, and then warm-ups were typically going to be performed pre-shift or at least at a designated time. We've got a client that they all come in about anywhere from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. But since they stagger their start times, they all stretch. An alarm sounds at 10 o'clock in the morning, and everybody comes out and stretches. So not ideal, but it's better than not having it, and it's nice that it's a designated time where they can all come in. So we've just coached those employees, hey, make sure you're stretching before you get started, and then hopefully if you can sell that and they are actually doing that on their own, then you've potentially got a scenario where they're stretching first thing, and then they're also stretching mid-morning, so they're getting some more time to do that. But I think the biggest thing is if they can at least do it at a certain time. Let's see here. So I just wanted to walk through a few micro break stretch examples. Again, these should be more specific to whatever you're seeing done, but these are all pretty easy ones to perform and do and teach. We like to do these little turtle chin ones. It's like that Mike Myers movie. What was that? Master of the Skies, when he does the turtle thing. I don't know if anybody's seen that, but that's how I like to teach this one. So we're kind of looking like a little turtle. Just some general stuff. These really work well with office workers because you can definitely, I know we kind of get wrapped up in the real physical jobs and assembly repetitious type job, but we definitely see our office workers having injuries too. So we don't want to overlook them, do some stuff to target them. Some general stuff, open that chest up, doing like a rocket man stretch. Talked about the back stretch a few seconds ago, where we maybe we're doing some work where it's requiring me to stay bent over at the waist for a long time. We can break out of that position, replenish that, unkink that hose, replenish that good blood flow and oxygen flow. Some easy stuff to do. These are easy to coach. These are easy to perform. You can give them variations if they don't have something. This one, for example, if they don't have something to hold on to, you can just show them some butt kicks. There's always some variations to use. Good hamstring stretches. We have a lot of employees with low back pain, so we all know that sometimes it's the hamstrings, the glutes that are tight. So we can increase that and hopefully decrease the low back pain. Calf stretches. So daily stretches before and after your shift be performed ideally, and then after an extended break. So I tell people all the time, we can stretch, we can do all the stretching before, do a really good job at it, work up a good increased heart rate, get some good blood flow going. If I go sit down immediately after that, it kind of defeats the purpose. And we just do that sometimes. But we work with some truck drivers. So this is a good example. They could stretch really good and then go get in their truck, and they may drive 30 minutes or an hour to their first stop on their route. Well, if they do that, then they need to do some stuff to get warmed up again, because by that time they have certainly put all kind of kinks in their hose in that long ride, and they're going to have some decreased oxygenated areas. So they're going to need to warm up again and get ready for work after an extended break. So most of our places don't get an hour lunch break, but if your places get an hour lunch break, I would I would try my best to at least teach them how to do some self stretching to get going again. If you can't get management on board with doing another designated 5 minutes or whatever, so at least get them going somewhat on their own if they've got an hour lunch break. I think that's way too much time to cool down before we get ready to do work again. All right, so we'll talk about building a program that targets the specific needs of your athletes. Okay, that's really important. Again, we don't want to just throw things at the wall. So we can say we started a warm-up program. We want to make it beneficial, get everybody the most bang for their buck, right? The employee and the client and you don't want to waste your time just having them do something. So we want to make sure that you're really familiar with everything that's going on, every job out there. There might be something in a department that's slightly different than what the most people are doing. And we want to make sure we include that job. We want to make sure we include stretches that target at-risk areas based on the job demands at that position as well. So typically when we want to do this, we want to make sure we're just spending a bunch of time observing the employees, see which body parts they're using, see the awkward postures they're undergoing, the stresses that are involved, positional limitations, that kind of stuff. Awkward posture, force, vibration, contact stress, volume, or repetition should be held in the highest priority. And that might be every risk factor. So we'll hold them all in highest priority there when we're designing a program. I'm going the wrong way. I'm a millennial, but I'm not the most tech savvy, so I apologize. All right. So how do we implement the right program? We want to examine all the ergonomic risk factors by way of job observations. So I don't know I talked to a guy I'm kind of mentoring that's fairly new to the setting, and we talked about that actually Thursday we had a call, and he was telling me about some challenges that he's having with time allowed to be with the employees. So that can be a limitation, especially when production is king, but we do need to try to talk to the employees, try to spend some time watching what they're doing so we can see what we're trying to target, what we're trying to prevent. I would encourage you to perform the job yourself if at all possible. That's the best way to do it. I think you talk to them. It's great. But also when we know how to do it, when we've done the job ourselves, that goes a long way to them too, when we're trying to tell them what to do, if we know the lingo, if we know how the job works. But ultimately, other than those things, we can see what hurts on us. What if I do the job for 10 minutes, what's sore, what's getting tired, what is my hands starting to cramp a little bit, my forearms are tight, what is it that's bothering me? So we want to do that to make sure we can design the most appropriate program. And then we won't get too deep in the mud here, but we are going to talk about some tools you can use to determine the demands of a job and try to go about it. So we'll just lightly touch on physical demands analysis, rule of REBAs, and some other assessment tools. Won't spend too much time there. So there's top ergonomic risk factors like we talked about before: repetition, awkward posture, vibration, force, contact stress, and then repetition. So that's something that we're doing a bunch of, right? Over and over again. We talked about the monotony before. But, we want to look at those and see what's being done there the most. All right. It can also affect just repetition in general. We talked about morale. We talked about kind of pain science. Repetition can also affect their emotional and physical well-being. It can drive them crazy, really. To a minor level anyway, kind of really stress them out, and we want to look at all those things. Obviously, if there's no variety in the job, then it can be less satisfying. We'll look at awkward posture. This is one of our truck drivers here that we work with, and we can see him. We can see him twisted up in that truck, but that's what it calls for. That's where his laptop holder is, and that's what it calls for. So we can't really change that much, but we can give him some stretches to target that, right? We can give some micro breaks to target that. So we want to look at all those things. I'll give you a little tidbit here. You can kind of look at the wrinkles on that guy's shirt, and you can tell he's kind of twisted up, right? So when we're looking at we're doing job observations, no matter what the job is, you can kind of look for little things like that. Look at how their wrinkles in their shirts are, and little things like that. They can give you tips to what's at risk the most. All right. Go to vibration. We covered his logo up there. Well, I don't know if we want to show. I got creative. I said I wasn't tech savvy, but you can see what I did there with that little stick figure. That's pretty cool. We talk about vibration here. Vibration can be a big problem. I've looked into implementing things like the vibration gloves or wrapping tools to decrease on that. But they're not super effective. So we need to really look. They help. They certainly help. But we do need to look at prehab resistance programs as a part of warm up or maintenance programs, and then obviously the warm up stretching to target those things. Micro breaks probably bigger than anything on vibration. Because if time allows for, their job allows for them to take mini breaks to get out of that position and return to normal, then that's probably going to be the most effective thing for vibration, is get some good micro breaks. Then force, we want to definitely look at force. That can be one of the biggest risk factors, and force is only multiplied. It's multiplied even more when we do things the wrong way. So when you're looking at things, when you're doing your job coaching, make sure you kind of use some examples like that. I mean, I'll throw a couple out. If you take a 10-pound box and they bend over to lift it, then research has shown that you can multiply that force by up to 10 times to the amount of stress that's exerted on the lumbar and the spinal areas. So you take a 10-pound box, it can quickly become 100 pounds of force and stress on the body. So we want to make sure we're doing that when we're doing our job observations and getting into our human behavior coaching. We certainly want to look at it when we're designing our programs. I think contact stress. We see a lot of this. It could even be, I've had truck drivers that start getting some ulnar nerve symptoms, and it's because they sit with their elbow propped up on the window when they're riding down the road for hours at a time, and all that vibration and contact stress causes some minor damage to that nerve. So we want to look at all those things. We want to open up our ergonomic eyes and make sure we're looking at all those things so we can target all those risk factors and hopefully design the right program, decrease some injuries. Look at some Reba and ruler really quickly. This is going to be kind of the super condensed version. This is not what we're talking about today, but we do want to mention it because I do think they can be effective when you're designing a program. If you can have some data like this, especially if you're kind of fighting a battle to justify it, you can use some of these things. Some clients and companies want to see the data. They like to see those things, and so they can be pretty convincing. How about the Reba? Not the wonderful Reba McEntire. If you're in the South, that may hit home a little more than other places. We love Reba. So that's an example of a worksheet there. You can also download these really easy and look at them, but you can do these pretty quickly and come up with some scores to justify your stretching. I think you could say, if you get increased score somewhere, you can certainly say, well, at the very least, we need to be doing some upper body stretching or whatever it is if you're limited. But I would encourage you to maybe look into using those kind of things. So you want to observe the task. We've talked about that already. Kind of interview and talk to the employees, watch it long enough to get a feel for what's going on. Ask the person what's sore on them. Ask them what concerns they have. What do they feel like the hardest part of the job is? All right. Select the postures for assessment. We want to see the ones that are held for the longest time. Those awkward postures, the high risk, most frequent, repetitious type posture, the ones that are known to cause discomfort, and the ones that are awkward, unstable, and where high force is required. Score those postures. Really, again, those are easy to do. You can look them up, at some point, and you can train yourself pretty easily on them just by reading the form. Process those scores, establish the Reba score. and then you can score them and assign a risk factor to them based on their score. So again, if you're fighting a battle where you're trying to get some stretching going, you want to justify doing it with management. At the very least, if you have a job that's going to yields a high REBA, a rule of score, either one, you can say we got to at least do some upper body stretching or some lower, whatever it is, some neck stretching. I think you'd be able to build a pretty strong case with some of that. We've got one client right now that's extremely data driven, and he wants all the numbers. So I'm going to use anything we can to help our cause. Going to the RULA just a little bit. Pretty similar in a lot of ways. You know, it's just another tool you can use. So you want to look at that, scored a little bit differently, but it's very similar. I've used them both. We had one client that insisted on having a RULA versus a REBA, and they didn't really know why, but they probably attended something that said it was better, and so we use that. So if you want to take those, and looks like I may have a duplicate slide. I apologize. All right, and then I want to get into what I like to do more than those are physical demands analysis, and you can find many different types that people use. We've developed our own with our company, and we like to do those. I think those will give you the most, I guess, practical information in a lot of ways. I kind of go back a little bit, that using that REBA, for example, I think it's a fine tool, but there was a time where I used it on a particular job. And the way some of it works, it can skew data. It can kind of skew the results a little bit, you know, because so if you take like this job, for example, it was it made like it had overhead reach task. So elbows got above the shoulder, got overhead, and it caused the score of that REBA to be pretty bad. But in reality, that was actually one of the easier jobs in the plant because that part was like 1 pound that they were lifting down. So it can have some issues there. So I would encourage you to, you know, have some other ways to gauge some things. PDAs are my favorite. Like I said, I think it gives the client the most beneficial information. You can take PDAs and develop job descriptions off of it and essential functions pretty easy. So I like doing those. You can also develop your warm-up programs really effectively that way. So I put an example in here. This is not ours. This is a stock image that I found. Ours are similar in some ways. But again, as long as they're addressing the things and looking at and giving you some easy to digest and easy to inform type data, then you can use those. There's all kind of sample ones that you can do. All right, let's talk about ways to implement the right program. Now, at this point, you have developed, you have found all the data. You've looked at all the jobs. You've gotten buy-in, let's say, from management. So now it's time to put it to work. So we presented it to management, supervisors. We've got them all. We want to make sure that they think it's practical. They think it'll be effective. We want to talk to our veteran employees, our senior employees here, because they're the ones who've been doing the job forever. Let's see if they think it's going to help, it's going to impact. See if they have any input. They want to add some stretches. They want to tweak some stretches, whatever it is. See what kind of pushback they think there may be. Is it realistic? Will it be fun? That's the key thing, I think, with it, right? Because in most scenarios, this is going to be volunteer programs. We won't get deep in the weeds here, but there are some clients that we've talked to about making things mandatory. And when you do that, it can actually affect benefit type stuff and insurance type stuff. It's kind of strange, and I don't fully understand it, but there are certainly some concerns about making things like this mandatory. So in a lot of cases, it's going to be voluntary. So the best chance you have at ensuring participation is making it fun, making it practical. Because it is discouraging when you've got a big circle of folks out there that are supposed to be stretching and there's just a handful doing it, and I've been there. So let's try to make it fun. Let's make it something that they can all do and that they'll enjoy doing. They'll look forward to doing it. You know, we talked about breaking up the monotony. So that's the only way to ensure longevity is making sure it's fun. And I would encourage you to ask your employees to take turns leading it, nominate some stretch captains maybe. All right. Why do we want to do this? I think we've talked about, I think we've pled our case at this point. I think we've got tons of research and support and reasons to do it and ways that it's going to benefit us and help prevent injuries. But I'd like to also talk about our OSHA approved toolbox, right? We know that in work related scenarios, our hands are tied by OSHA a little bit. And as far as what we can do, and prescribing exercise and stretching is not one of those things that we can do. As frustrating as it is, I think that's the biggest pushback, or I guess frustration I get when I'm hiring new athletic trainers to the setting, is that their mind's blown, right? That is backward thinking, is when we can't give somebody exercise or stretching to do. But what we can do is we can refer to pre-established protocols. If it's something that they're used to doing, that they're expected to do as a company protocol, OSHA does say we can go back and refer to that, as long as we don't modify it based on the discomfort, based on if somebody got a shoulder injury, as long as we don't change anything about what they were doing that morning. Maybe they came into work, they did their stretches. There was a shoulder stretch that we had on there based on their jobs. They injure their shoulder later that day. They come see you, we can point them back to that morning when they did those shoulder stretches, and we can tell them to try some of that and see if that feels any better. We just cannot modify it. We don't want to name sets or reps there, right? We can just point back to what we've been doing. So it's another tool in your toolbox. So OSHA does permit the warm up, stretch, and flex micro break program to be established as injury preventative measure. I'm not going to read section 1904.7b, but it says we can do that, bottom line. So I'll walk you through a scenario here really quick, and I'm going to read this verbatim. I apologize. So a scenario here: employer requires employees to engage in stretching exercises at the beginning of each shift and hourly during the shift. An employee reports to his supervisor that he is feeling minor discomfort in his left shoulder associated with his work task. The supervisor advises the employee to continue participating in the stretching exercises that all employees participate in each day, and to report back if he continues to be symptomatic. The employee never reports back to the supervisor about any continuing symptoms. The question: what would the supervisor's advice to continue participation in the daily exercises can constitute medical treatment for OSHA record purposes? So here it talks about basically, in this scenario, there is no change, according to OSHA, there's no change in the course of stretching exercises to specifically address the discomfort in the employee's shoulder. Therefore, the supervisor's advice to continue with the already existing program of stretching does not constitute medical treatment beyond first aid for record-keeping purposes. Provided the employee did not receive any other treatment, restricted work activity, or job transfer, the case does not meet the recording criteria. That's huge. If we can do that, that's really huge. Again, it's just something else we can do, right? We can't, if they come in, otherwise, if we don't have that warm-up program established, they come in with a work-related injury, we can do ice, we can do some massage, we can do some heat, we can do some tape, whatever. You know the drill, you know what you can do. But if we've got these, effective programs established based on all the things we've talked about today and all the things we've gathered to make sure it's the right program to do, then we can go back. Just like in this scenario, we can go back and we can give them something to do that will really change, that could really change the trajectory of that injury. So really good to do. Keep it in your back pocket. Make sure you got a good one that you can refer back to. Kind of got ahead of myself. We've already talked about that. Just increased participation. I like to make, we've had clients where we make videos, we star the employees in it so they can have TVs that roll the stretching program. We have had employees submit songs. So there's some scenarios where, like in that one I was talking about, where they stretch at 10 a.m. every day, there's a song that's going to come over the loudspeaker, and they let the employees submit song choices that are appropriate. They definitely kick some out sometimes. But they do get to kind of submit, and that gives them a sense of, I guess, ownership. It's cool to have that and that influence on something. So I would, if that's possible, that's really, really effective. We've seen the employees have a lot of fun with that, being able to pick songs, nominate their stretch captains, and then just switch it up on them periodically to break up monotony if you can. You might not always get to do that in a big manufacturing setting. You may have to just stick with what you got. for the most part, because it was probably quite the undertaking to get to do it in the first place. But there are scenarios, we do a lot of work in the utility industry in Alabama, and we get to visit individual crews. And there's definitely been times where I've thrown something out of nowhere at them, right? They kind of get in the routine of doing the same old thing, and I'll throw a partner workout at them where somebody's doing, marches while the other one's doing, arm swings, and they got to do 100 arm swings before the other partner can quit marching. Just something like that. Break up monotony there and keep it fun. All right. I think we kind of already talked about the challenges. Apologize for getting ahead of myself there. But again, you're gonna have some challenges. I think we've talked about ways to address those things. Biggest one probably is going to be your time constraints. So that'll just be talking to management, trying to figure out something that you can do, to get something going. So, all right. Does anyone have any questions? That's strange.
Discussions in the chat about manly yoga. Someone suggested that. I think it's called DDP. So that that was a suggestion. Instead of calling it yoga, you might get a little more buy-in from your more masculine work groups.
Yeah.
According to Heath, is promoted by a former WWE, WCW wrestler.
Well, I heard DDP, and I immediately thought about Diamond Dallas Page. And
yeah, that's who that is. I am not familiar with the wrestling setting, so not my thing. But apparently, we need to look into it.
Yeah. If Diamond Dallas Page is endorsing it, I'm on board with it. I'll do yoga with him leading it.
Hey, so this is Chris Harp. I'm the one that typed that in there. I've personally been doing that for about 5 years now. And I really like it. And what did sell me was Diamond Dallas Page. Yep. But if you read the backstory and all the success stories that he's had with just his broken down, these were athletes, not industrial athletes, but how so many, former wrestlers, and then he's got just other military type folks and stuff that have just brought themselves back from, not being able to move basically. Into full function. That's kind of what sold me on it. And like I had typed in the message, you sell it either by calling it advanced stretching, or you sell it with the the professional wrestler aspect. At least that's what was successful for me on a construction site with the manly men of construction.
That's cool. I'm writing that down. Awesome. Yeah, there's definitely more than one way to skin a cat when it comes to this, and just figuring out things that'll be applicable or just relatable. That's neat. That's cool. Good job on that. Got anything else? It's strange to talk for an hour and not have anybody talk back to me.
I think Taylor and Luis have a question. Taylor, you want to go, and then we can get Luis's question?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think it's a really great topic. I just presented something similar the other day to safety professionals at a conference. And I think it's really refreshing to hear. And it was really positive to see at the conference other safety professionals, without me prompting them that I'm an athletic trainer, speaking highly of us, saying that we do bring a lot to the table, and even discussing the stretching is worth it. It's not just, mumbo jumbo voodoo, like it does work. Yeah. And so during mine, I was trying to educate them on, I understand we lose money on fast starts. However, the ROI is you're going to have a healthier workforce and retain that workforce. And obviously cost goes with that, and obviously like just keeping that overall healthy workforce going. So I think this is a really good presentation. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Good job presenting.
All right, go ahead, Luis.
Hi, hello, Ben. Can you hear me?
Hey, yeah.
Hey, how you doing? Great job on the presentation.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions on my end. So the first one, what would be the average cost that you think for like a 50 people manufacturing or distribution setting, what would be the average cost for a full implementation of the Stretch and Flex program?
For someone to pitch that?
Yeah, exactly. So let's say from start to finish, what would you think the average cost would be to fully implement from start pitching it all the way to full blown implementation? What would be the average cost?
So in this scenario, if I'm pitching to a client, like somebody I meet at a conference wants me to come in and look at designing a Stretch and Flex program specific to their employees, is that correct?
Exactly, that's correct. Yes.
So, so in that scenario, I'm coming in and I'm doing some kind of analysis, like a physical demand analysis or something, to determine the right thing. It depends on how many employees they have, how many jobs they have, really. But let's say it's going to take you 10 hours from start to finish. We just quoted somebody, we took about $1,500, if it's going to cost 10 hours to come in, observe, go back, take all your data. You got to do all that stuff, do your write up, get your stretching going. It's around $150 an hour, give or take a little bit.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. So the only reason I mentioned that is my line of work is in insurance. And one of the biggest things that we try to preach on is those engineering controls.
Yeah.
So how would you try to communicate with the potential customer or client to implement engineering controls versus a Stretch and Flex program?
So doing engineering controls in place of a Stretch and Flex program.
Exactly.
Yeah, that can be trickier, right? Because engineering controls are typically more costly. If we're talking about changing processes on an assembly line or whatever it may be, I think you basically, if you can take a job that you're looking at on an assembly line and that you've come up, you've already went and you know what change you want to make and you know how much it's going to cost. If you can go back and you can look at how many injuries that job has caused and what those injuries are, and you can get a dollar sign tied to that versus how much that change is going to cost. And in a lot of cases, especially if it's been a really problematic area or job over many years, then you've spent a lot more money on injuries and getting that employee returned to pre-injury status than you will on making that engineering change.
Gotcha. Okay, because that's one of the reasons. One of the biggest things that we try to push for our clients is those engineering controls, because they can eliminate or engineer out those specific hazards. And implementing a Stretch and Flex program would be the prevention side, right? It's helping those that are not as active, have a little bit of restrictive range of motion, but at the end of the day, the hazard is still present with those engineering controls not implemented. So that was pretty much it. That's my question.
Okay. Yeah. Did that answer it? I was making sure. Okay. Perfect.
And to kind of elaborate on what Ben said, the cost of a Stretch and Flex program beyond your billable time of, observing the job and creating the program itself, it really is just employee time on the clock. Like, how much time is the employer willing to allow their employees to take a break to do the warm-up program? Beyond that, you can create magnets, posters, but there really is not a big oversight or overhead cost for a Stretch and Flex program beyond you billing for observing. It would just be like the time that they allow their employees a break to do the warm-up stretches on the clock. That would be probably one of the biggest costs. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, but really you can make it as easy or complicated with handouts, materials, but it's really just the person showing up doing the exercises. You don't need fancy equipment and things like that necessarily for a Stretch and Flex program.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of the time we're going to have some kind of startup meeting. So it's an easy time to implement it there if your client or if your locations are meeting to do safety briefings or production briefings or whatever it is pre-shift with their employees, which is pretty common, then you tack it onto that. And, you're talking about, they go from a 5-minute meeting to a 10, maybe at most, if they do 5 minutes. But whatever you can get right there, that's a good time to implement it. And then it doesn't really, it's not as noticeable, I guess, than taking it and implementing a whole new stretch break.
Exactly. No, great points, everybody. And I'd like to add that one of my previous past employees was at Amazon. And so they really harped on the different stretches. So going in, you have your stretches during the morning, obviously voluntary. You have your different micro stretches throughout the shift or throughout the entire shift. And depending on where you're at, some locations might even have stretches at the end as a cool down. But, you know, one of the biggest challenges that we faced was the participation, right? Some of the employees just wanted to go in, get out, and that's pretty much it. And having that educational component of like, hey, this is going to help you out long term compared to nothing. That was one of the biggest challenges that we faced at my location specifically.
Yeah, giving them something to look forward to, you know, finding a way to make it fun. Like I said during the presentation is key, and breaking out of the monotony of their day is something they do tend to look forward to. But you're going to have some resistance early on for sure, and it could take a while to break through that. But you'll typically start seeing them have some fun with it.
And
Yeah.
I was going to say too, Louise, like stretching, it can be seen on the hierarchical scale as an administrative control for safety. So somebody who's looking for a quick ergonomic solution, just to add, if they don't have that huge budget to do a $50,000 conveyance lowering, this could be a really good solution as well.
Absolutely.
Oh, exactly, 100%. And that's something, and that's one of the biggest things that, depending on what client you go to, it's going to be what type of budget they have. Obviously, as we're all safety professionals now, we want to go for the hierarchy of changes and try to eliminate or at least engineer out the controls. But you have a couple clients that are truck drivers, and you really can't eliminate some of those controls. So that's one of the things I mentioned early on is for an distribution or manufacturing setting, some of those engineering controls can be a little bit more beneficial. But some other clients that if you're a truck driver or things like that, those are going to be a little better to implement the stretch and flex programs.
Sure.